What's up, everybody? This is Cyrus, a supernatural researcher and author, and a quick shout out to the subreddit Cosmic Disclosure where I post all the time. So, this video is for you guys. So, I wanted to basically talk real quick about the raw material, the Law of One, which is now a very popular book. It was popular back in like the early 80s, I guess, around that time when it came out. And it has had a resurgence of popularity due to very popular, how do you say it, New Age or spirituality slash ufology based author David Wilcock, as well as many of these alleged government insiders, people like Corey Goode, Emery Smith. So a lot of these guys are now citing the Law of One, which was this old book that was allegedly channeled by this lady named Reichert, and I guess around the late 70s. And so I want to mention that typically I am very skeptical of channeled works because virtually anybody can say that they are a channeler, and they can use that moniker to obtain authority on a subject without having to do any work, which is the modus operandi of many scammers in this world, because all you have to do is say, well, you don't believe what I'm saying, but I'm channeling it. Guess you gotta believe me now. So this has made me very weary of a lot of quote channeled work, and I've seen bad channeled material in the past. I've seen groups that claim to be channeling extraterrestrials, leading people out into the woods, endangering their lives, and claiming they will be abducted by aliens, only to have nothing happen. I have also seen channeled material, the authors of channeled material, obtaining donations of a large degree of money from people who are following that channeled author, and claiming that the money will go into some special project that never materializes. And maybe in a future video I'll talk about these specific cases, but at the moment I'm not going to begin calling those people out. But the point being, channeled material can be bad news. I always defer when it comes to spiritual work such as like the Silver Birch books, because in this case, Maurice Barbanel was a confirmed and highly talented spiritual medium. So it was confirmed that he was really obtaining information from someplace else, and so it adds a lot more weight to what Birch had to say. And typically the advice in Silver Birch books is really spot on, really practical, and it also makes the topic of life after death a lot more simplified. I've also been partial to the Seth material. It's one of the first books that came out, I think, in the quote New Age world. And what else? I guess, those books are my mainstays. But what about the Law of One? Now, since it has become so popular again and so many people are referencing it, my opinion after having briefly read the first book, and that doesn't do it justice because it's written in such an archaic way, you have to really pick it apart to understand like the meat and potatoes of the material. But my opinion is that I like the Law of One. And I don't know much about this alleged channeler, Ruckert. Carla, is that right? Reichert? So I can't say if she is objectively providing information. But the material is pretty darn interesting, right? And I would almost lean toward this maybe being real channeled material. So the entity being channeled, in this case, is a quote 6 density extraterrestrial of some kind that we would imagine are therefore the entities behind the ancient Egyptian culture, the raw material, like the god Ra. And the book outlines a lot of kind of common sense spiritual principles, but it goes into a lot more detail. And it uses kind of new terminology for things that we talk about a lot already. As an example, it talks about the afterlife and the astral plane and the kind of, all the material that, maybe we've learned about from Paramahansa Yogananda on through near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and all that material that we know about, that there is a parallel universe that we go to when we die, and in many ways it's very similar to this world, in other ways it's very different. And Ra would call it a higher density, right? So we're on third density right now, and then when we die, we switch to fourth density, which is basically, if we want to go into the kind of the mechanics of the other side, it is a place where our basically the energy that composes our bodies is spinning faster. It's a higher vibrational realm, and so entities who live on that realm are capable of doing things that would look like supernatural powers to us. And then we can even we can be philosophical about it and say maybe many of the UFO sightings that we see are just ships or people from this fourth density coming down to third density to check on us, and that really we are a very primitive civilization, and that when a civilization in this density, in this realm, reaches a certain level of technological and spiritual advancement, then they can build ships and go into the fourth density, which we call the afterlife or the astral plane, and come back to this side by just punching switches on a spaceship, that simply. And where the book gets philosophical is when it talks about what really is spiritual progress. And this is why I'm kind of glad the Law of One has gained in popularity, because this is something people need to be reminded of. So we're living in an age where people think spirituality is doing yoga and having the perfect yoga pose that you can post on Instagram. Let me tell you, earlier this year I was in Bali, Indonesia, and that's all it was. There's all these 20-something Aussie girls like doing Instagram yoga poses and talking about how spiritual they are when, they were about as spiritual as a bumblebee, but that wouldn't be fair to bumblebees because they are part of nature, and they probably are a spiritual creature, whereas these Instagram yoga posers are, they don't even have that going for them. Now I know I'm being a little bit mean here, so let me back up. Basically, the Law of One reminds us that the main principle is that we're all one, which means there's one spirit. And this is also the same stuff we hear in Silver Birch and Seth and all the material from alleged higher entities, that every creature comes from the same source level of consciousness, which is infinite and all-encompassing and all-knowing, and that we all have a mental link, and we're simultaneously one with this, with God, with source consciousness, and we're also individuals. So basically, source consciousness split itself apart into an infinite amount of individual awarenesses, so that it can explore itself and explore reality and create the lovely existence that we see today. And this is a principle. Maybe it's always been like this. It's just the nature of how source consciousness works. So we are all one, and yet we are also separate. And because we are separate, we inherently have these selfish behaviors that we are kind of created with. And pursuing those selfish behaviors divides oneself and people around that person from being at one with others. Practicing love reminds us that we are at one with people around us, and then we begin to empathize with those people, right? So the Law of One distinguishes this between the path of service to self and the path of service to others. So what is spirituality for real? It's simply going on a path of service to others. And it doesn't mean that you can have no more service to self because you're still an individual. You're still going to have to think about yourself. But if you just think a little bit more about other people, just be a little bit more conscious. If you are at the store grocery shopping and it's Thanksgiving, and 4 people are trying to get by you, and you're just there looking at the cranberry sauce, then that's a indication that you're not very aware of other souls around you, and that we're all connected as one, and that the glue that holds it all together is love and positive energy. And if you can express that love to other people, then it brings them closer together, and then it raises the vibration of everybody. And if everybody will do this, then we would end up in a higher density civilization, and we wouldn't be ruled by corporate banking complex and deep state cabals and predatory extraterrestrials and anything that wants to control and manipulate us. And we'd be on a higher vibration. Beyond all that, we could live glorious lives of love and splendor and imagination, creativity, happiness, and all that good stuff, right? If we would just remind ourselves of that. So at the end of the day, I'm glad the raw material is not written in such a way that it could bring about cults. It's authentic, I think, in what it presents, if not difficult to read, difficult to understand, and written in a kind of weird, I don't want to say robotic, but it's written in a very impersonal kind of way, because allegedly a 6th density entity, I guess, has such little ego identification that it doesn't even speak anymore as I am, I feel this way, I like this and that. It just speaks from like a massive collective, which I think is a bit of a waste, because frankly, I don't care if I'm 6th density, 10th density. I think it's important to have a little bit of personality, a little bit of humor. And maybe the reason that extraterrestrials reincarnate as humans is that they're trying to learn about like having some color, having some humor. Because let me tell you, if all the extraterrestrials are like these raw material folks, then they really need to learn how to lighten up a little bit and have a party. The authors of the raw material, according to everybody's favorite insider, the insider's insider, known as Corey Goode, a very contentious public figure in the UFO community, who I listen to. I think he's a smart guy. I like what he has to say, but he also has done some weird stuff, and all of his fantastical stories about aliens and secret space programs and how he's a chosen messenger and all that kind of stuff is not provable. But he's an interesting guy, and he claims that the author of the raw material, or is it he who claims it, or was it David Wilcock who originally made this proposition? I don't know. But either way, the Wilcock Corey Goode team claim that the authors are these bird-like entities known as the blue avians, and they look like kind of like blue chickens, but they're very pretty blue chickens on 2 legs, and they have like soft blue fur, and they're very colorful. You can Google blue avian, and allegedly, according to those guys, these are the authors of the raw material, and that's why the Egyptians have all these hieroglyphics of like birds, because it was the bird people who were coming to them and teaching that material to them. And then people took some of the more arcane information from the teachings of these extraterrestrials and began coveting it, creating occult societies around how they could twist and manipulate spiritual principles for their own purposes, thus creating the Illuminati. And eventually that Illuminati would go on to control our planet and control all of us in the form of the deep state cabal, according, my friends, to David Wilcock, who, I don't know, maybe he's right. You can go watch Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia if you want to find out more about that and go down that rabbit hole. I've been down that rabbit hole, came out the other side. Still don't know how I feel about all of it, but something tells me that in between all the weirdness and uncertainty and nonsense in the UFO/conspiracy field, there's some truth going on as well. And it'd be interesting if The Law of One is the book that links reality to whatever may be unreality, because it's difficult to sometimes to know what is fact and what is fiction. All right, well, this is Cyrus. If you like this video, if you like what I have to say, then I encourage you to hit subscribe. I talk talk mostly about life after death, what happens when you kick the bucket, and similar metaphysical concepts. You can stay in touch. You can click show more on this link down below in the description, and you can from there click to buy one of my books like Understanding Life After Death. Check out the Facebook group. We have almost 8,000 people in the Facebook group right now, so it's a great community if you want to discuss objectively and rationally many supernatural metaphysical subjects. And I also have classes too about life after death, so if you want to get involved, all that info is down below on the description, and I'll talk to you guys next time.